With Lululemon, the real gift happens when they're living in it. When you give the fan favorite everywhere belt bag, the real gift is... And when the ultra-soothing Rest Feel slides are the gift, you're really giving them... This holiday, Lululemon makes it easy to give little luxuries that go beyond. Open the moment. Shop now at lululemon.com.
You're listening to Achtung Millwall, broadcasting from the beautiful South Birmingham. Accept no substitute.
Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to Achtung Millwall, back after the international break, the interminable international break that seems to come around with the regularity of a local bus service. Joining me on this show to kick over the traces of a famous FA Cup run 1937 is the man himself, Mr. History. It's Neil Fissler. Welcome back to the show, Neil.
Hello, mate. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really glad that the internationals are fading into the distance now and we're getting back to proper football. I actually don't mind international football, and I caught myself watching a few games last weekend, internationals, but there's so many of these breaks now. It just really breaks the rhythm of the season up, Neil. Don't you find?
Mate, I can't stand international football. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
It just seems that they put these pointless... Okay, you have to have international football. Yeah, well, I accept that. But to have this Nations League that seems to be utterly pointless. I think the whole point of it was because didn't somebody qualify for one of the Euros a few years ago, and then they didn't play a friendly, so they stayed seeded. I think that's the point of it. But mate, they have them at the worst possible time. Okay, I can understand them having them in September, October, but November and August.
It's such a banal league. I mean, the Nations League, I was watching, funny enough, I was watching the Welsh celebrate beating, it was in the Welsh language channel, listeners, S4C, which is on iPlayer. I turned that down, and I was watching them play the other night against Iceland, and they were celebrating promotion to the top flight of the Nations League, like they'd actually just lifted a World Cup. You know, it was like a proper game to them. I get the purpose of giving international football a bit of an edge, a bit of competitive, feeling. Because I mean, friendly games I hate even more than the Nations League football. But there's just so much of it. I think we're in danger, and I think this is probably a sport generally question, Neil. Before we get into the meat of today, is that we overkill stuff, don't we? There's so much of it. There is so much football now, so much sport generally. I think all for TV, of course. You overdo it. You dilute it.
Mate, I think there's so much international sport. You have a look at it in rugby union, with England are playing their fourth game this weekend for successive weekends in November, as it always is, and then that leads into the Six Nations in February, which seems to go on for 2 months. And then you have the summer tours and that.
So overkill. Do you find that as a fan of the game? I'd say the same about cricket, Neil. It's a relentless cycle.
That was going to be my next point. Funnily enough, I was talking to a mate of mine last night, and the subject came up of, have we got any more tours coming up? And it turns out that we're playing New Zealand.
New Zealand soon. Just been to the West Indies, haven't we?
Yeah, in 3 test matches. Which they're cramming in between next week and Christmas. And it just seems to be a never-ending onslaught. As you said, we've just been to the West Indies.
Yeah.
We had a test series in Pakistan before that.
Yeah.
Then I think, do we go to India in January or something for
the Indians are over in the summer,
like
aren't they? It's going to be it's a big series. Of course, it is. Sells out.
But it absolutely seems to be never-ending treadmill of international sport. Funnily enough, international cricket is the one form of international sport that I am fully invested in. I love international cricket. I can't lie, and I've even got into the disco cricket. But it just seems Yeah, it just seems that this weekend's England international against Japan is just pointless because England are crap, but they'll win it.
Yeah,
Last weekend you had Scotland playing Portugal. Yeah,
yeah,
Portugal do play rugby. They're not very, but they're okay.
yeah.
And you've got New Zealand, Australia, South Africa over, and it, you're just bored of it by the fourth weekend. You just want it to hurry up and finish. I'm doing some stuff on the Wales Australia game on Sunday afternoon. It's almost like with an arm tied up behind your back.
Well, it's like the song Elvis Costello, "Pump It Up till it loses its meaning." I think we're in danger of doing it. Television drives it. We don't have to beat around the bush on it, Neil. I mean, we'll watch stuff on. But there, I mean, the Champions League, European Champions League football, and then there's the endless conference Thursday night games, 5 o'clock kickoffs. All that. It's just there's so much that you just can't devour it all. There we are. These are the times we're in. It's not going to change in a hurry. So it fuels the sporting fire, isn't it? So
Yeah, but the one good thing about being a Millwall fan is you ain't ever going to have to worry about playing in the Europa
Euro
Conference
Conference
League
League. You never know. You never
or
know. We
the
get up in
Europa
that Premier
League or
League.
even the Champions League or anything like that. But what it does do is these international breaks, they do break up the momentum of a season.
Well,
That's say it because we were flying. Yeah, I know we drew just before.
I thought at Stoke, Neil. I don't know if you saw the game, but I thought we were running on empty. I mean, we got ourselves our noses in front there. A good game to get in front of, I thought. But some of the players, the midfield players, just looked like they're running on empty a little bit. And I think, just to contradict everything I've just said, it probably the international break has come at an opportune moment. I mean, Neil Harris was mentioning the fixture schedule in this is South London Press describing it that the amount of football we were playing before the international break is bonkers. It's the same the fixture overload to fit around these meaningless international
In,
fixtures generally.
because because really, if you look at it, we needn't have played, although we played them at a good time because we beat them Leeds on the Wednesday night. We could have played
Yeah, yeah,
Leeds last weekend, and that would have at least given us
yeah.
a bit of a break between the Sunday afternoon game and the Wednesday evening game or whatever we played.
Absolutely.
And then we were back on the treadmill for an early lunchtime kickoff at Stoke, weren't we? And Jurgen Klopp would have done his absolute conkers over it, wouldn't he,
I
last
think
season if he'd have had that kind of schedule in that kind of time frame. But let's not worry about it. Good old Millwall.
I mean, the way we've elevated the likes of Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola and others put them onto these pedestals, well, they've actually damaged the game. When they've taken away the essence of what defined our football, the replays. I'm thinking of the FA Cup and this kind of um, faux competition where the under 21 sides will play the full sides in League One. Is it the trophy, EFL trophy? Stuff like that. Everything's geared around the Premier League. I mean, I suppose you can always argue that money will buy its own way in the end, and you see that in every direction in modern life. But I think they've been quite, as much as they've generated interest at the top level, I think they've been quite damaging to the sport overall. That's just my own personal opinion. Um, anyway, there we are. Neil, we've come together to talk about Sunderland, specifically a very famous FA Cup run, semi-final run, in actual fact, in 1937. Millwall making the semi-finals as a third division South side. Very famous run. And the link, I suppose, and obviously we've got Sunderland on Saturday, big game. We're vying for playoff football to give us a shot at the big time. Sunderland are trying to break back into the top flight, which is where they will probably see themselves as belonging. And what really struck me looking at this 1937 era of Sunderland and also now the modern version is just how big a club they are. I mean, I hadn't really absorbed they were 6 times league champions before the Second World War. This is a big club. and top of the championship at the moment. But the opponents in 1937 were major opponents, and they would still see themselves as that now, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they were. They were actually champions in 1936,
Yeah.
so they went into that season probably flying, to be quite honest, and they ended up winning the cup, didn't they, that season?
36,
But
37,
but
yeah.
no, they were a big team
Yeah.
back then. Were they it was the Bank of England club. Was it them or was it Arsenal? But they weren't
They were
shy
in that
of
conversation.
spending.
Everton, Sunderland, Arsenal, these were major league names before the war. And 6 times league champs, looking at the Wikipedia, FA Cup winners twice in their history, runners up a few times, and the same in the League Cup. I mean, Roker Park, one of the iconic grounds of English football. I never went there. Did you ever go to Roker Park, Neil, in your days as a reporter? Did you ever get up there?
I have been up there, yeah. Fucking horrible place when I went up there,
So I never got
but then again, it was falling down just before they moved to the Stadium of
Stadium of
Light.
Light.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's one of those places. Yeah, but it's one of those places where I can remember you've had a pee and you were looking outside of the ground.
Old school. This would be like the brick wall that you'd piss up, basically.
Yeah, but there was. Yeah, but the brick wall, I think, was was along on the outside of the ground, or you could see outside the ground because they used to have little window
Little
slats,
slats.
didn't
Yeah,
they?
that's right. That's right.
Yeah,
Back in the olden days, little
and
kids. Yeah.
yeah, and you looked outside the ground, but no, it's a different world
Absolutely.
to now, to
Absolutely.
the ground at the Stadium of Light. But it was a proper old school, one of your traditional football grounds, wasn't it? It was,
Yeah, I mean, I've never been. It's
yeah, it was one of the big.
just one of those. It's such a long way to go, I suppose. Listen, I've got half an idea. I might try and get up if we're still in contention, perhaps this season. I might try and get up there for the Stadium of Light game. It's just one of those bucket list places. I've got to have it on my list to say that I've been there and done it. But we'll see. We'll see on that front. But we are talking about a very famous FA Cup run, 1936-37 for the Lions. I've been looking at that season. It was actually a fairly so-so league season, Division 3 South football, listeners, back then, 1936-37, under the management of famous manager Charlie Hewitt. We've touched on his story in these shows over time, Neil. But we'd finish up, I think it's 8th. We finished in the table that season. So it wasn't a particularly major season from a league perspective. But the FA
Well,
Cup
we were building that season. We'd started to put building blocks in place. We actually won the Third Division South the following season.
Yeah, it was a development season, I
So,
suppose you called it, wouldn't you?
so this was the start of, or this was in a period when Millwall had tremendous ambition.
Mm.
We're getting fantastic crowds. I think we were probably the 8th and 9th most supported club in the country.
Yeah.
Towards those dark days of World War II,
Yeah.
appearing on the horizon, and it was a gradual process. It was a gradual process. It wasn't like now, instant success, microwave success,
No.
where you just had some water, and then all of a sudden you're expected to.
Lo and behold, you have success on your plate. Yeah.
Yeah, it's we were building towards something. I think, we were in the process, weren't we? Rebuilding weren't
Well,
we adding seats to the stand, and
we
things
rebuilt
like
the
that?
seats at any
Yeah,
of the older, and in fact, probably almost all the listeners. Everyone, I look at our analytics listeners, and we don't really have a kids audience. I always refer to the kids, but they don't really listen to us anyway. It's all going to be blokes over the age of 30. So hopefully most of you will remember Polo Lane. But the side stand, which was a much smaller version as a result of a fire during the Second World War. Not Adolf Hitler couldn't touch it, but a discarded cigarette could, burned it down. But we had a major stand built they were gearing up for First Division football, Neil, and just before war broke out. That was the intention. And it was, there were developments in the ground. They were looking to, create a stadium able to cater for the crowds that the First Division would generate. Some of the crowds in this cup run, listeners, are absolutely mind blowing. I mean, we'll come on to the cup run in a moment, Neil, but this was all terracing. I think the side stand had some terracing at the front and seats towards the back of the big stand, but unfortunately that met a demise thanks to the build-up of rubbish and a discarded cigarette during the course of the Second World War. I suppose people's attention was on other things other than clearing away the litter that had built up underneath the stand, I suppose was largely wooden as well, so up in flames it all went. Major blow for the club, as well as the bomb damage, of course, from the Luftwaffe. But prior to the war, we really were gearing up for the big time, weren't we?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it looked as if we were going to break into that. I think just before war had broken out, we'd made a couple of signings and they were seen as being the final pieces of the jigsaw, and we were really going to go for it.
Absolutely.
In that abandoned season of 39-40, when I think we played 3 or 4 games, we didn't do anything, I don't think, in those 3 or 4 games, but the intention was certainly there that we were going for it that season. And if you're ever on the British Newspaper Archive and you read the pre-season predictions, it was all about what Millwall are going to do this season and Millwall's ambition for this season. And World War II kind of
got in the way, didn't it?
It did. Adolf, I think, I still maintain that Hitler declared World War II to keep us out of the First Division and to become a force in English football. I will always maintain that.
He wasn't successful in much else, but he certainly did that. That's for sure.
But it ought to go down as one of the great conspiracy theories.
Oh dear, yeah. But it's a kind of Barbarossa 2 that would have been, keep Millwall out of the top flight. Oh dear. Anyway, so it was a moderate league season, development season. We'd finish 8th in the 3rd Division South. Back then, you had to be champions to get promoted. It was a very difficult division to get out of, in all honesty. That's why once you're in it, you were largely marooned there until you could get a championship-winning side together, which took some time, some building. But the FA Cup is one of the great runs of our history. We've made the semi-finals back in the early days of the century now. I think we were semi-finalists in 1900 and 1903 as Millwall.
1903.
Yeah,
Derby County.
Millwall Athletic, back in the old Isle of Dogs days. But this was all the greater achievement, really, because we were a 3rd Division side and we were playing, as Neil has said, one of the great clubs of England, reigning league champions, Sunderland. So this was a huge, huge moment in our history. Just to run through the cup run, Neil, it begins with some remarkable results. The first round, we played Aldershot away at what's the name of the ground? Is it the county ground? I can never remember
the Rec.
The
recreation ground.
This one end of it is open to the park, isn't it? They have a big net up to stop the balls going into the park, or used to anyway. And that was a 6-1 win at Aldershot, 28th of November 1936. We then faced Gateshead on the 12th of December at Coldblow Lane, a 7-0 win. So some big scoring wins to put us into the 3rd round, which is where the story really begins now. Millwall 2, Fulham 0 in front of 32,000 on the 16th of January 1937. 32,000, and the numbers are going to get bigger than that, Neil, as this cup run gathers.
Yeah, there was 18,000 there for the Gates. Yeah, there was 18,500 there for the Gateshead game.
It's incredible.
We'd be doing our nuts now for 18,000, wouldn't we?
Achtung, Millwall.
I mean, the biggest crowd I ever stood in at Coldblow Lane, me personally, was the Liverpool game, I think, in 88. I think there was 23,000 in the den officially that night. And you can take it from me, listeners, it was a very tight squeeze in the ground. I think I'd been in a 22,000 crowd, I think, when we played Pompey a few years before that, back in the 70s, sorry. But that was the biggest one I've ever been in at Coldblow Lane. And it was very tight. The idea of imagining 32,000 in there, Neil, goes beyond into realms of fantasy. I can't imagine what it was like. Um, tight, I would imagine. Let's put it that way.
You people weren't built like me back then, were they?
the Liverpool game, just as a side story, listeners, was, I might have told this before, but I'll tell it again because I'm getting to the age now, Neil, where I'm going to repeat myself all the time. So tune into this podcast, you're going to hear me repeating myself. But that was the only time I've ever been carried off my feet in a crowd surge. I'd managed to get to the Liverpool 1988 game, and I managed to get it right in at the very back at the Coldblow Lane end. I got there late and couldn't see a thing. We scored. I think it was Dennis Salmon down at the other end of the ground, the Alderson Road. Couldn't see a thing. And there was a crowd surge forward. And actually, my feet came off the ground. It's the most weird experience I've ever had in my life. And I was carried forward by this kind of, swaying mass of people as we went 1-0 up over Liverpool. And somehow, I didn't die, obviously, didn't get crushed to death, although I'm sure that was a strong possibility. I actually found myself further in down the terracing in a pocket of space, and I could actually got quite a good view of the rest of the game in this little pocket of space. So it was actually quite a fortunate crowd surge. I couldn't see a thing. I couldn't see a thing about Danny Salmon's goal. I couldn't see a thing. There we are. Anyway, 32,000 at home in the 2-0 win over Fulham. That game was notable, Neil, for the first showing of the famous clock that was on the top of the halfway line. The pictures in the Lions of the South book show it. I think they must have moved it when the roof got put in, but there was no roof on the halfway line terracing that older listeners will remember well. And at the top of that was a big, as James Murray describes it, a rather incongruous-sized clock, a bit like Arsenal had a clock end. And we had a clock on that side terrace at the very, very back, and that was the first time it was officially in action. And that clock would meet its demise, courtesy of Adolf Hitler, because the Luftwaffe bombed it. And I think they might have targeted it and sent it flying in the bomb explosion in 1943. So that was the end of the clock. But that was his first appearance in that 2-0 win over Fulham. So into round 4 we go. And another bigger crowd now, Neil. You thought 32,000 was big. Let's go to 41,500 in a Millwall 3, Chelsea 0. And we're starting to dispense with first division opponents. It must have been an insane atmosphere inside that ground. When, nowadays when we take on Premier League opponents, I'm thinking of the Leicester game a few years ago and the cup run before that. We're dispensing with Premier League. The intense atmosphere. This must have been the madhouse, mustn't it? Can you imagine that? 41,000 people in Coldblow Lane.
Can you imagine Chilwell, wasn't it, that was frightened to take a throw in given a Leicester game? Christ, no. Yeah, that was with, 16,000 in there. Christ knows what it'd have been like if we'd have had 41,000.
41,000 hardened Dockers wanting success in front of their home crowd. Oh dear! But there we are. So a 3-0 win over Chelsea, January 1937, brings us to a famous game at home to Derby County in the 5th round, and this was famous both for the result, but also for the size crowd that would be allowed into the ground. That was for many, many years. It may still be deemed as the record home attendance. 48,000 nil at home in a 2-1 win over Derby County. I mean, how much of the game anyone would have seen there, I really can't imagine, because that is literally an insane attendance at the ground, isn't it? The old ground.
Can you imagine 48,000 in that ground?
No, I can't. I can't. Maybe 50,000 people.
And this was one hell of a Derby team as well. So no wonder it was.
Yeah.
Sammy Brooks played for England, and Jack Barker, I think, played for England. And so you'd have been dreaming, wouldn't you? It would have been the 5th round of the FA Cup. And back then, the FA Cup, it was the competition, wasn't it? Let's make no bones about it.
No.
It was the competition. So you'd have been dreaming of Wembley.
Yeah.
There'd have been the build-up
Yeah.
to it. You'd have been excited for weeks or for however long it was. I think there was only a short break in between
Well, there was
rounds.
a few weeks. So the 30th of
Yeah.
January for the Chelsea game. Then we're playing Derby on the 20th of February. So that's what, 3 weeks, maybe later on.
And I don't think they didn't have all ticket games too often
No.
back then. They might
Well,
have made this.
I think that was the reason for the size crowd. I think it was just turnstile payment. It must have been incredible to get into the ground. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine. Having been in a 23,000 crowd, I thought that was mad. I thought we were never going to get
Double it.
double it. So yeah, a 2-1 win over Derby. I mean, I think that really strikes me. There isn't much in the way of YouTube footage of any of these games. Obviously, bar the next one, the Millwall 2 Man City 0, famous quarter-final result, 6th of March, 1937, in front of 42,000. I think somehow they'd reduced the attendance. They'd put a cap on it, only 42,000. We can't handle that. The 48,000 must have been near danger point, I think. And even by the standards of the day, they contained it a little bit to a mere 42,000. But there is footage on, I think it's Pathé News, Neil. You can get that on YouTube, of the win over Manchester City. Back then, Millwall would have, that game, they played in an Arsenal kind of away kit, red and white, because Man City had to change their shirts for the blue of Millwall, and the rule then was that both teams had to change their kit. So we actually played that game in an Arsenal style red shirt with white sleeves. But the kind of fever pitch, the grip of the imagination on the area generally really comes out when you see the post-match scenes when the crowd invade the pitch there. Well worth looking if you get a chance, listeners. Have a look at it. It's absolutely amazing. The famous picture of the Mill players running through the crowd to get off the pitch, a sea of mud. I think Manchester City and all these teams, Derby, Chelsea, were just glad to get out of the place alive. I think that must have been their overwhelming sense. They just wanted to escape and get away from this, this madhouse called Cold Blow Lane. But there we were. We were in the semi-finals after, what's that? 120,000 people had watched us, and plus the 32,000, so it's 170 odd thousand people would have watched us on this cup run at home. Quite incredible, really, numbers, isn't it? When you stop and look at it that way.
Yeah, but especially now. But I don't know how long it would take us to have 120, 130.
If we got a full house, it's got it's 6 plus 7 plus games, I suppose, something like that. But I mean, this was a major cup run. But the crowds in the league. I mean, this was the era of big attendances at the Den. And just looking at there, Reading, we played on it's just a regular league game pre-Christmas, 19,000. That was the kind of par, 32,000 versus Luton at home in November. So big crowds back then, but this was insane levels of attendance. To take us into a famous loss, unfortunately, Mill versus Sunderland played on the 10th of April, 1937. Played at Huddersfield, a neutral venue, which apparently is a bit of a controversial choice. The Millwall found themselves, not for the first time in their history, Neil, at loggerheads with the Football Association over their choice of venue, which was felt to favour the northern side, Sunderland, who were already a First Division major name. They didn't need many more advantages, but they got it by having it at Huddersfield's ground, Leeds Road back then, another ground I'd never been to. Been to the new one, but not to the old one.
Yeah, but Leeds Road, I think they held the semi-final the season before.
Yeah.
The other semi-final this season, in the season we're talking about, was ironically played at Highbury. But we wouldn't have got that. But you'd have thought that Huddersfield's a damn sight closer to Sunderland than it is to London.
You'd have thought Birmingham, Villa Park, maybe, I don't know, one of those kinds of grounds. But anyway, there it was. The choice of venue was laid down by the committee men of the Football Association, played at Leeds Road in front of 62,000 people. And again, we said the same point about Cold Blow Lane, but Leeds Road wasn't a major level of stadium, but it's still got 62,000 packed into its terraces with a major contingent from South East London, going up to via the train service. I've got an advert here, which I will stick online, listeners, because otherwise we would just be talking about it. But it's an advert in one of the newspapers. FA Cup semi-final, Millwall versus Sunderland. Restaurant car excursion, leaving King's Cross at 8:10 a.m., arriving in Huddersfield at 12:39, returning from Huddersfield at 6:35. Good deals to be had here. Lunch or supper on the train, 2 and 6. The return fare, 13 shillings to get yourself up to. I think I'd have some of that, wouldn't you, Neil? I might throw a lunch or supper in for £0.50 as well on top of that.
Mate, to be honest, that would have been a considerable sum of money
It
back
would have
then
been.
for
It would have
people.
been.
I know that.
It would have
Yeah,
been.
but now that we go on about ticket prices now,
Yeah.
but at least you should earn fairly decent money. I should imagine that.
Yeah. No, that would have been a sum. Yeah. Leaving King's Cross.
13 shillings back then would have been the best part of a week's wages, wouldn't it? And that's
Yeah.
just to get there.
Lions of the South by James Murray describes the fans leaving King's Cross, taking barrels of beer onto the train, ready for the.
Some things never change, do they? You have a look on Facebook, and you have these modern day football fans on some of these away days accounts, and they've got a few cans and a couple of bottles and a buffet there, and you'd actually think that they actually think they're groundbreaking, but they're not at all, are they? We
No.
were thinking of this in the 1930s.
Probably would have needed a bit of a hand to hump on a couple of barrels worth of beer onto the train, but it was done. And we don't really have any numbers on how many went up there, but it would have been a fair proportion of that 62,000 would have come up from Millwall. Some pre-match tension in the sense that we had a few fitness issues over our main striker, Dave Mangnall. Neil, he was finally pronounced fit almost a day before. And there's a report from the Sunderland Echo, actually. Millwall satisfied by training tests. Dave Mangnall will be fit, it says. Today brought good news for Millwall, who meet Sunderland in the FA Cup final at Huddersfield tomorrow. Dave Mangnall, the London club's captain and goal-scoring centre forward, put in a spell of more than an hour's training at the Den without showing the slightest ill effects. And as a Millwall official put it, he is 100% fit to play. Millwall have no other troubles to beset them. So there was a little bit of a hint of danger. Mangnall was our top scorer for the season, so it would have been a major loss if he hadn't have taken the field. Dave Mangnall scoring 25 goals in the season with Burdett. Is it Ken Burdett as 2024? These are names that are little remembered now. Dave Mangnall and Ken Burdett. I mean, hopefully that's what we try and do on these shows now, is to get these names out there, because it was it would have been a major loss if he hadn't played in this game, wouldn't he?
Yeah, what seems quite funny is that we prepared at the Den. Back then, we used to go away for special training.
Yes.
And things like that. You used to go to the seaside.
Yeah.
I don't know if they've gone to the seaside for this.
I don't.
But yeah, no. But these are players that, they are largely forgotten. You look at this. Yeah, we look at the team. I think Red Smith is probably the most well-known England international.
Yeah, let's run through the team. Let's run through that team, because I think it's always worth saying the names, because that's really the point of what we're trying to do with these shows now. I think to put a bit of a mark on great servants of the club. This was a great landmark run in the FA Cup, so it's worth running through that team. Goalkeeper Duncan Newell. Then we've got defenders Ted Smith, Tommy Innes. These are names that I must admit not come as surprise, but some do spring out on me. I mean, I hadn't really thought about Jimmy Wallbanks, Tom Brolly, Jimmy Forsyth. I know Bob Thomas, Dave Mangnall. We've mentioned Ken Burdett, Jimmy McCartney, and Reg Smith, who is J.R. Smith, isn't he? The England international.
Yes. That's right. Well, Tommy Innes was a famous commercial artist.
Was he?
Who he produced some artwork for the supporters club.
Wow.
Probably what he's probably best known for. Brolly, I think, played for us on both sides of the war.
Northern Irish international, Brolly, or was it Republic of Ireland? I don't know. It might be Northern Irish.
Ireland.
Ireland,
I think you'd best just say Ireland. Before you.
I'll cause another
yeah,
diplomatic incident.
yeah, well, exactly. Yeah. You get us cancelled. You'll get us cancelled unintentionally. I've not swore in this issue.
No, you haven't.
Yeah, but I've not done anything. But you're leading us down the
I'm going down
cancellation.
yeah, that's right. I'll try and get my woke credentials back, listeners. So there we are. That was the team. We would lose, unfortunately, semi-final, but after a plucky struggle. This is a report from the Sports Argus, which I think would be a same day. It's dated the Saturday the 10th. So this would be an evening edition.
Yeah, but it's the Birmingham. But it's the Birmingham. Yeah, but it's the Birmingham football paper.
So, like the Evening News used to publish Saturday night, this is the Birmingham version of the Evening News for the results.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So the match between Sunderland and Millwall at Huddersfield at Leeds Road was expected to produce a tremendous struggle. Half an hour before the start, 50,000 people were in the ground, and so great was the pressure, listeners, that crash barriers collapsed behind one goal mouth. These people were removed, while ambulance men busied themselves with casualties. It's just treated as part of the sports reportage then. Police had a difficult task controlling one section of the crowd. I don't know which section that would be, listeners.
Sunderland. Yeah, but Millwall fans don't do anything wrong.
Too pissed. Sunderland played as advertised, whilst Millwall left out Daniels had bird it at centre. So this was just purely a report on the result. Saturday night papers didn't have much scope for reporting of the game, kids. They'd have a score and have like some pre-prepped background info, and then whatever they could cram in at the last minute in the stop press sense. They were produced on the Saturday night, and this was the way you got your football results. So that was the Birmingham.
Yeah, but they phoned through match reports. The Standard would have phoned
through their copy on the night, wouldn't they?
Had a runner. Yeah, basically. But because you've got the Birmingham paper, there's no Birmingham angle, is there?
Report here. This is a Sunday Mirror, Sunday Pictorial, as it was called back then. Millwall unlucky free kick ends London Cup hope. Sunderland 2, Millwall 1. After their hard struggle, Sunderland have never won the FA Cup, but they will go on to do so this season. After a hard struggle with Millwall at Huddersfield, that doesn't inspire confidence. It's written obviously before that. Sunderland were badly rattled in the first half, and it was very obvious at times that one or more of their players were spoken to by the referee, which was a big deal back then. They had no yellow card system, and to be spoken to by the referee was something. It was something.
Half killed, didn't you, to get spoken to by the referee?
A quiet word meant that you're on a warning. You may well see the early bath, as they called it, if you carried on. This journalist, PJ Moss, says, I'm inclined to the opinion that the referee erred when he awarded a free kick to Sunderland halfway through the second half, in which the winning goal was scored. So the Moody free kick. The incident happened right in front of me, and it is certain that Wallbanks could not have avoided the ball striking his arm. The rules of football says it must be a deliberate, but the ball fell on his arm off an opponent's head. So basically, Sunderland started, as it puts here, as if this was going to be a cakewalk, but the quick tackling of Millwall soon gave them the knowledge that it was to be a very keen struggle indeed. Mill led, scored first, a well-placed kick by Inns, putting Mangnall in position for this player to beat Mapson from close range after just 10 minutes. So we're leading on 10 minutes. It must have been some atmosphere in the ground when we went ahead there, Neil, mustn't it? Can you imagine that?
Yeah, but if you thought going 1-0 up against Sunderland when we won was bad enough, I thought that second half went the slowest 45 minutes of my life. Yeah. Can you imagine 80 minutes? You had 80 minutes of torture against a team that were champions of England. That contained Rach Carter and players of that ilk, very famous names. And you go 1-0 up, you can't help but dream, can you? And then you look at the clock, or you look at your watch, and there's only 10 minutes gone.
That means you've got 80 to go.
80 minutes.
Achtung, Millwall.
Sunderland turned the heat up on us. The report continues. They forced several corners. All were cleared but one. That was fatal for Mill. A beautifully placed ball by Duns went to Gurney. Our goalkeeper, Duncan Newell, fisted the ball the way at his header, but Gurney got the ball and equalised. So half-time, one each. The second half reads just as pretty much Sunderland pressure. The Mill defence pinned back, 6 or 7 corners being forced. Ewell performing marvellously between the posts. And Wallbanks, the outstanding figure in defence, was ubiquitous. There's not enough use of the words ubiquitous in modern sports reporting, listeners. Wallbanks, the outstanding figure, he was ubiquitous. And then there's this free kick awarded for allegedly handball, which was headed in for the winning goal. In general, to sum it all up in a nutshell, very unlucky. And plucky Millwall, Neil. That's not the first time you'd have read that in your life, is it? Plucky Millwall, unlucky to go out of the cup at the hands of greater opponents.
Yeah, we always get shit referees, don't we?
Strange thing, they got a little separate section in the Sunday Mirror. They've got reports of the 2 games. So Sunderland 2, Millwall 1, Gurney and Gallagher for Sunderland, Mangnall for Millwall. Played at Huddersfield, 62,813, generating £5,240. You don't see that anymore, how much money got generated. I'm sure the Premier League wouldn't want that published in the media. By contrast, so 62,000 people generated £5,000. By contrast, the West Brom won Preston North End 4 other semi-final, played at Highbury in front of 42,636, also generated £5,200, same amount of money. So I think the prices must have been higher at Highbury than they were at Sunderland, because the same amount of money got made.
Yeah, either that or it's not been reported.
Yeah, or it might be money might have gone. Hats off to Millwall, he says. They went out fighting like lions. A goal up inside 10 minutes, beaten by a goal from Sunderland due to a doubtful free kick in the second half. Touch and go to the last shrill whistle. The gallant Lions. That's the Sunday Pictorial, now known as the Sunday Mirror. So there it is. That was the end of our cup run. A very, very famous cup run in Millwall history. It will be superseded, of course, in the end in 2004. Neil's touched on that 1-0 win over Sunderland in 2004 at Old Trafford. I picked out a few players, Neil, ones that I didn't know a huge amount. I picked out Dave Mangnall just because his name has cropped up a few times. Born in Wigan, 1905. 72 games for us between 1936, 1938. 48 goals from 72 games. That's some return, isn't it? So 48 goals from 72 matches in that 2-year period.
You'd be creaming yourself for a return like that now, wouldn't you?
Just, I'm reading this from Neil's own A to Z of Mill, which is it's invaluable, really is, listeners. So Christmas is coming as well, so do feel free to look it up on Google. Dave Mangnall, played at places like Maltby Colliery, a miner, former miner, a majestic and natural goal scorer. Once scored 10 goals for Leeds versus Stockport County in a midweek league game up north. FA Cup finals with Huddersfield in 1930. Broke their scoring record of 42 goals 2 years later. Millwall captain when we made this semi-final we're talking about. And then won a 3rd Division South title the following season. Prolific scorer in wartime football. And then he finished up managing QPR and then retired to Penzance, where he passed away in 1962. Dave Mangnall. Different world back then, wasn't it? You know, minor turned footballer, different football game entirely.
Yeah, no, there would have been quite a few. That would have been a popular occupation for footballers, and but let's be honest, but they'd probably been very grateful to have escaped life down the
Many a
coal
sportsman
mine.
would say that.
It wouldn't
cricket
have been.
And football would have said the same thing. Having been in a mine, I was totally off subject, but we went to had a holiday a couple of years ago now in Herefordshire. So I took a trip out to a mine. That's like a museum in South Wales. And they take you down into the mine, and it is pitch. We have the expression "pitch black," don't we, listeners? They tell you the lines of it, and it is pitch black down there. I can tell you that much. So the idea of making a living down there is amazing. Hats off to anyone that works in the mines. It wouldn't be something I'd fancy. all that came with it, collapse of the mines and the dust and everything. But there we are. We've gone off subject. So Dave Mangnall, top scorer for the season there with 25 goals. I picked out James Wallbanks as well. Again, not a player that I'd really, I'd seen the name, but I didn't really know much about him. But so I'm just looking at your bio here. One of 8 brothers. 8 brothers. Fancy having that. 5 of whom played in the Football League. So 5 brothers out of 8 played for Football League clubs. Another minor. Strong in the tackle, with heading ability to match. He could fill any position. He played in defence, and he was the standout figure, I think, mentioned in that press report. Finished up passing away in 1979, aged 17, Reading, having done a bit of management at Reading and Ramsgate, and then a little bit at Millwall as well. James Wallbanks, another name that hopefully will get some kind of a memorial, if you like, if you want to put it that way, listeners, because these are not names that are well known. The other one I picked out was Ken Burdett as well, Neil. 62 games, 30 goals inside right, 1936 to 38. It's quite a short career with the club, but another high return for comparatively few games, really. 62 games, 30 goals. Quite incredible.
Yeah, as we've said. But it just shows that we were looking for players. These were all 3rd division players, weren't they? And your more veteran type of players. So we were continually striving to replace and to improve. And it seems a bit harsh when you've got a goal scoring ratio of a goal every 2.5 games.
Well, it's funny. You look at the results that season. We had some big scoring wins, and if we did get beat, we lost big as well. We were veering from winning one week 6-0 and then losing 5-0 in the following week. It's quite a roller coaster. I think you describe it as.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, there was nothing scientific about it back then, was it? Go out, try and score one more than them.
There we are. Those are the players I picked out from that famous side there. FA Cup semi-finalist 1937, ahead of Saturday's game versus Sun. Another big game, of course, but I thought it might make a nice linkage prior to Saturday's match. Bit of a test on Saturday for us, really, Neil. I've actually fielded an interview with a podcast this week. We're asking about our playoff chances. The very fact we're even talking about it is quite astounding. And I think we'll have a bit of a litmus test on Saturday as to where we really stand, because those wins over Leeds and Burnley, as great as they were backs to the wall. The kind of spirit we've just seen described in the 37 side, the kind of every man to the pumps. Whether we can sustain that for long enough is going to be the question. I'm reasonably hopeful of a result on Saturday. Whether we're good enough to sustain a playoff run or not, I don't know yet. I just think we lack a little bit of depth at times.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. I think the biggest shock is Nick doing another media appearance.
I can't stop listeners. I can't leave it alone.
For some,
I don't go looking for it. They email me. They message me. I don't go looking for it.
Yeah, well, War Talks Nick Hart. I think
Nick Hart talks.
But no, it's yeah. Well, really, you look at it. There've been 4 pigs of games, haven't they? Yeah, well, admittedly, 3 of them have been at home. But you look at it: Burnley, Leeds, Stoke, no cakewalk, but probably the easiest of the 4, and then Sunderland at home. And just to back it up, we're going to the team at the bottom of the table, aren't we?
Midweek
on Wednesday night.
Yeah, which is always it's a big game, isn't it? Mill versus Portsmouth.
But this is a litmus test. It's a big test of what we are made of.
I agree.
And
yeah,
I think we're doing all right. We just need to sustain it and probably temper our expectations. I think that that's when things will go belly up, is when we start expecting.
When we start loading barrels of beer on our away day trains. Because the mania has gripped us all. But if only we could temper our expectations at the den, it'd be a different club, listeners, wouldn't it? There we are. I really enjoyed that one, Neil. Big thank you to Neil Fissler coming on the show. 1937 era linked to today to some extent. We'll see how we get on at the weekend. But thanks for doing this, Neil. I really appreciate it. Always good to talk to you, mate.
Yeah, no problem, mate. No problem. Enjoyed it as always with these history shows.
And we'll be back, dear listeners, at the weekend with all the usual coverage of that big game Saturday afternoon. So until the next edition of Achtung Millwall, from Neil and myself, it's Arrivederci Millwall, and bye for now.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.